Jimin was hurt by the public comments. Jungkook replied on stage with the phrase, "She is the most precious person to me," making Jimin cry behind the scenes. A single sentence on stage shatters Jimin's heart and ignites a hidden truth, revealing love, pain, and sacrifice behind the spotlight. The arena fell silent the moment Jungkook's voice cracked through the speakers. "She is the most precious person to me," and somewhere behind the stage curtains, Jimin stopped breathing. The roar that followed was deafening, a tidal wave of cheers, screams, and flashing lights, but backstage the air felt suffocatingly still. Jimin stood frozen in the narrow corridor, fingers curled into the fabric of his jacket so tightly his knuckles blanched. The words echoed in his mind, replaying with merciless clarity. "She, not they, not us, she." A stagehand rushed past, the scent of hairspray and hot wiring trailing behind him, but Jimin barely noticed. His reflection stared back from a darkened monitor, eyes glassy, lips pressed into a line too controlled to be natural. He had practiced this expression for years, the neutral mask, the professional calm. Tonight, it was cracking. On stage, Jungkook's silhouette was haloed by white light, his shoulders squared in that familiar way he used when he was trying not to falter. Jimin knew every nuance of that posture, every microsecond of hesitation in his breathing. To the audience, Jungkook looked confident, radiant, untouchable. To Jimin, he looked like someone standing on the edge of a confession he would never fully make. The public comments had started weeks ago, whispers disguised as headlines, speculation masquerading as concern. Articles dissected Jimin's smiles, his silences, the way he lingered near Jungkook during rehearsals. Fans argued online, strangers reducing years of shared memories into trending tags and cruel jokes. Jimin had told himself he could endure it. He always had. But tonight's words felt different, final, deliberate. He turned away from the monitor, packing the narrow hallway. Each step echoed like a countdown. His chest tightened with a familiar fear, the fear of being too much, too visible, too easily discarded. It was a fear born long before fame, rooted in childhood rooms where affection was conditional and silence was safer than honesty. He pressed his palm against the cool concrete wall, grounding himself in its rough texture. "You're fine," he whispered, though his voice trembled. "You knew this would happen." What he hadn't known was how it would feel. Memories surfaced unbidden, late-night studio sessions where Jungkook fell asleep against his shoulder, shared laughter over burnt ramen in a dorm kitchen, the quiet promise in Jungkook's eyes the night he confessed he was afraid of losing the people he loved most. Those moments had never been named, never defined. They existed in the fragile space between friendship and something more dangerous. And now, in one sentence, that space had been erased. A burst of applause thundered through the walls as the performance ended. Footsteps approached, staff, dancers, managers, voices overlapping in a chaotic chorus of congratulations and instructions. Jimin wiped his eyes quickly, though he hadn't realized tears had fallen. He inhaled deeply, summoning the version of himself the world expected. When Jungkook finally emerged from the stage entrance, the energy around him shifted like a magnetic field. He was glowing with sweat and adrenaline, hair clinging to his forehead, eyes scanning the hallway with restless urgency. For a brief second, his gaze locked onto Jimin's. Everything else dissolved. There was apology in that look, and fear, and something stubbornly unspoken that made Jimin's chest ache. "Hayoung," Jungkook began, his voice barely audible over the noise. Jimin forced a smile, the practiced curve of his lips sharp enough to cut. "Great performance," he said, stepping aside to let others pass between them. The words tasted like metal. Jungkook's hand twitched at his side, as if he wanted to reach out but didn't know how. Cameras lurked everywhere, even in the shadows. Privacy was an illusion. The moment slipped away, swallowed by staff ushering them towards separate dressing rooms. Inside his room, Jimin closed the door and leaned against it, the muffled chaos outside fading into a distant hum. The mirror lights cast a sterile glow over his face, illuminating the tear tracks he hadn't fully erased. He stared at his reflection, searching for the person he used to be, the one who believed that love, in any form, could survive the weight of public scrutiny. His phone buzzed on the table. Notifications flooded the screen, headlines quoting Jungkook's words, fan edits pairing his statement with images of a smiling actress from a recent collaboration, comments dissecting every angle. The narrative had already been decided. Jimin set the phone face down. He sank into the chair, the vinyl creaking beneath him, and let the silence settle. Beneath the hurt was something more complicated than jealousy or betrayal. It was grief for the version of their bond that had existed in quiet glances and shared breaths, for the safety of ambiguity that had allowed them to be everything and nothing at once. A soft knock broke the stillness. Jimin didn't answer. He wasn't ready to see Jungkook's face up close, to hear explanations that might make the pain more real. The handle turned slightly, then stopped. On the other side, a faint exhale, familiar, hesitant, lingered before retreating footsteps faded down the hall. Jimin closed his eyes. He understood, perhaps better than anyone, the weight Jungkook carried, the expectations, the scrutiny, the relentless demand to be both authentic and untouchable. Saying she was safer, simpler, a shield against a world eager to twist any truth into scandal. Understanding, however, did not make it hurt less. He stood and approached the mirror again, lifting his chin. The man staring back looked composed, even elegant, but his eyes betrayed a storm he could not share with anyone. He dabbed powder beneath them, erasing the redness, restoring the illusion. Outside, the arena lights dimmed, signaling the end of another night of performances, another chapter of carefully curated perfection. Inside, Jimin's heart adjusted to a new, fragile reality, one where love, in whatever form it had taken, would remain unnamed, hidden in the spaces between words. He picked up his jacket, smoothing the fabric with steady hands. Tomorrow there would be rehearsals, interviews, laughter rehearsed for cameras. Tomorrow he would stand beside Jungkook again, close enough to feel the warmth of his presence, far enough to pretend it meant nothing. As he reached for the door, he paused, fingertips resting on the handle. The ache in his chest had not disappeared, but it had changed, settling into something quieter, more resolute. Pain, he realized, did not always demand confrontation. Sometimes it demanded endurance. He opened the door and stepped back into the corridor, the noise and light swallowing him once more, his expression serene, his heart carefully hidden where no microphone could ever capture its truth. The dressing room door slammed shut hard enough to rattle the mirror, and before Jimin could turn, Jungkook's voice cut through the air like a blade. "Why didn't you answer me?" Jimin's shoulders stiffened. He kept his back turned, pretending to adjust the cuff of his sleeve, though his fingers trembled. "There was nothing to answer," he replied, his tone cool, precise, the same voice he used for interviews when he needed to sound untouchable. A bitter laugh escaped Jungkook. "Nothing, I said that on stage, and you call it nothing." Jimin spun around then, the restraint in his eyes cracking. "You said exactly what the world wanted to hear." Silence fell, thick and electric. Jungkook's chest rose and fell rapidly, his stage makeup still smudged at the edges, glitter clinging to his collarbone like remnants of a persona he hadn't fully shed. "You think that was easy for me?" he shot back. "You think I wanted to stand there and choose?" Jimin's voice sharpened. "Yes, you chose, Jungkook, in front of thousands of people, in front of me." The words hung between them, raw and undeniable. For a moment, Jungkook looked younger, like the boy who used to hover in doorways, unsure if he was welcome. "I didn't choose against you," he said quietly. "I chose survival." Jimin's breath hitched, anger colliding with something more fragile. Survival doesn't require erasing people. "You're not erased." Jungkook stepped closer, frustration radiating from him in waves. "You're the one person He stopped abruptly, jaw tightening, as if the rest of the sentence were too dangerous to release. Jimin searched his face, heart pounding. "The one person you what?" The hallway outside buzzed with distant chatter, a reminder that they were never truly alone. Jungkook ran a hand through his damp hair, packing once across the small room before turning back. "You know what you are to me," he said, voice low. "No," Jimin whispered, the word trembling. "I don't, because every time it matters, you hide behind something safer. The accusation struck its mark. Jungkook's eyes flashed. And what would you have me do? Tell the world everything? Watch them tear you apart worse than they already have? Jimin flinched. The public comments, the cruelty disguised as curiosity, flashed through his mind. Strangers debating his worth, his masculinity, his right to exist as he was. He had endured it with a smile, but the scars ran deep. You think I'm fragile, Jimin said, voice barely above a whisper. You think I can't survive the truth. I think you shouldn't have to, Jungkook replied immediately, not because of me. The confession lingered, fragile as glass. Jimin looked away, blinking rapidly. The room smelled faintly of sweat, powder, and the metallic tang of stage equipment, a scent he had once associated with dreams coming true. Tonight, it felt suffocating. You said she, Jimin murmured. Not someone, not anyone, she. Do you know how that sounded? Jungkook closed his eyes briefly. Yes. Then why? The question broke out of Jimin before he could stop it. Years of restraint collapsing into one word. When Jungkook opened his eyes again, they were shining. Because they were ready to destroy you, he said. Because the rumors were getting uglier. Because every article had your name in it, not mine. Because if I gave them a story they understood, they'd stop digging for one they didn't. The room seemed to tilt. Jimin's anger faltered, replaced by a hollow ache. So you sacrificed the truth. I protected you. By hurting me. Jungkook's silence was answer enough. A sharp knock rattled the door, followed by a manager's voice calling Jungkook's name. Neither of them moved. The world outside could wait. This moment had been building for too long. You don't get to decide what hurts me, Jimin said, his voice steadier now, though his eyes glistened. You don't get to choose my pain and call it protection. Jungkook swallowed hard. And you don't get to pretend you're fine when you're breaking right in front of me. The words landed like a blow. For years, Jimin had perfected the art of appearing unshakable, of turning vulnerability into performance. But Jungkook had always seen through it, the tightness in his smile, the way he lingered in empty practice rooms long after everyone else left. Why does it always have to be a choice with you? Jimin asked softly. Why is there never a world where we both get to exist honestly? Jungkook's expression crumpled for a fraction of a second before he looked away. Because the world we live in doesn't allow it. That's not the world, Jimin said. That's fear. The accusation hung between them, more intimate than any confession. Jungkook took a step back, as if the truth had physical weight. Maybe I am afraid, he admitted. Afraid of losing everything we've built, afraid of being the reason you get hurt, afraid that if I say the wrong thing, they'll take you away from me in ways we can't fix. Jimin's breath caught. You're already losing me, he whispered. The words shattered something in Jungkook's eyes. Outside, the hallway noise swelled, laughter, footsteps, the distant rumble of equipment being wheeled away. But inside the room, time seemed suspended. I don't want to lose you, Jungkook said, voice breaking. You're home to me. Jimin's composure finally fractured. Tears slipped down his cheeks, unchecked, catching the harsh dressing room lights. Then stop making me feel like I'm a place you visit only when no one's watching. The raw honesty of it left them both breathless. Jungkook crossed the distance between them in 2 strides, stopping just short of touching him as if an invisible barrier held him back. His hands hovered uselessly at his sides. Tell me what to do, he pleaded. Tell me how to fix this. Jimin let out a shaky laugh. You can't fix it with one grand gesture. You already made one tonight. Regret flickered across Jungkook's face. I thought it would make things easier. For who? He had no answer. A long, fragile silence stretched between them, filled with everything they had never dared to say. The dressing room lights buzzed overhead, a harsh reminder of reality intruding on something painfully personal. Finally, Jimin wiped his tears with the back of his hand, inhaling slowly. We have a show tomorrow, he said, his voice hoarse but controlled. And the day after that. The world doesn't stop because our hearts do. Jungkook stared at him as if trying to memorize every detail. Is that it? He asked. We just go back to pretending. Jimin met his gaze, and for the first time there was no mask, only exhausted honesty. We go back to surviving, he said. It's what we're good at. Another knock sounded at the door, more insistent this time. Jungkook hesitated, then reached out, his fingers brushing Jimin's wrist in the briefest, most electric contact. You are the most precious person to me, he said, the words trembling now, stripped of performance and spotlight. Not the world's version, mine. Jimin closed his eyes, the confession both balm and blade. When he opened them again, Jungkook had stepped away, the distance between them restored, the moment already slipping into memory. The door opened, flooding the room with noise and light, and the fragile truth they had shared retreated into silence, unresolved, undeniable, and far too real to ever be forgotten. The press conference erupted into chaos the moment a reporter shouted, "Is it true Jungkook was referring to a secret girlfriend last night?" And Jimin felt every camera lens swing toward him like the barrels of loaded guns. Flashes exploded across the room, turning the air into a strobe-lit battlefield. The long table at the front felt suddenly too narrow, too exposed. Jungkook sat 2 seats away, his posture rigid, jaw locked so tightly a muscle ticked in his cheek. Their manager leaned toward the microphones, attempting to redirect the questions, but the damage was already done. Please keep the questions focused on the tour, the manager insisted. But the room smelled blood. Jimin, you've been at the center of recent rumors, another journalist pressed, voice sharp. How do you feel about Jungkook publicly confirming he has someone special? The words struck with surgical precision. Jimin's hands rested calmly on the table, fingers interlaced, a picture of composure. Inside, his pulse roared in his ears. He could feel Jungkook's gaze without looking, heavy, protective, terrified. He leaned toward the microphone. I feel, Jimin began, his voice smooth and even, that people hear what they want to hear. A ripple of murmurs spread across the room. Are you denying the rumors? A voice shouted. I'm saying, Jimin replied, meeting the sea of cameras with a steady gaze, that not everything precious needs to be explained to strangers. The statement landed like a grenade. Jungkook's head snapped toward him, their eyes met, shock and something dangerously close to hope flashing between them. The manager coughed into his fist, clearly alarmed. Another reporter stood abruptly. Is that an admission that there's more to your relationship than friendship? The word relationship echoed, thick with implication. Jimin felt the room tilt, the weight of years pressing against his ribs. He thought of the late-night confessions, the unspoken promises, the quiet way Jungkook always found him in crowded rooms. He thought of the pain in Jungkook's eyes the night before. He also thought of the headlines that would follow. Before he could answer, Jungkook leaned forward, gripping his microphone. Next question, he said, voice firm, leaving no room for negotiation. The tension snapped, but did not disappear. It coiled tighter, invisible but suffocating. The conference ended in a blur of forced smiles and rehearsed gratitude. The moment the doors closed behind them, the hallway outside became a war zone of hushed arguments and urgent whispers. What was that? The manager demanded, voice low but furious. Do you have any idea what you just implied? Jimin's expression remained calm. I answered the question. You escalated it, the manager shot back. We had a narrative, now we have speculation. Jungkook stepped between them, his voice dangerously quiet. Don't talk to him like that. The manager blinked, taken aback by the steel in Jungkook's tone. I'm trying to protect both of you. By deciding who we're allowed to be, Jungkook asked. Silence fell. Staff members nearby pretended to be busy, their eyes darting nervously. Enough, the manager said finally. We'll discuss this later, separately. He walked away, leaving a trail of tension in his wake. Jimin exhaled slowly, unaware he'd been holding his breath. You shouldn't have done that, he murmured. Neither should you, Jungkook replied. Their voices were low, but the heat between them was undeniable. They moved toward the exit in strained silence, bodyguards forming a protective barrier as they stepped into the waiting van. The door slid shut, sealing them into a confined space heavy with unspoken words. For several minutes, only the hum of the engine filled the air. Finally, Jungkook spoke. "Why did you say that?" Jimin stared out the window at the blur of city lights. "Because I'm tired of being reduced to a rumor." "That wasn't just about rumors," Jungkook said. "You knew what they'd hear." "Yes," Jimin admitted, "I did." The honesty hit like a shockwave. Jungkook ran a hand over his face. "You're playing with fire." "Maybe," Jimin said softly, "or maybe I'm done pretending I'm not already burned." The van slowed at a red light, neon reflections sliding across their faces. Jungkook studied him, searching for the line between courage and self-destruction. "You think this will make things better?" he asked. "No," Jimin replied. "I think it will make them honest." The word honest lingered like a challenge. Jungkook laughed quietly, but there was no humor in it. Honesty could end everything. "Then maybe everything wasn't built to last," Jimin said. The cruelty of the statement surprised even him. Jungkook recoiled slightly, hurt flashing across his features before he masked it. "You don't mean that," Jungkook said. "Don't tell me what I mean," Jimin shot back, the heat finally breaking through his composure. "You stood on that stage and rewrote our reality in front of the world. Don't act like you're the only one who gets to decide what survives." The van fell silent again, the driver wisely keeping his eyes forward. Jungkook's voice, when it came, was barely audible. "I was trying to save you." "And I was trying to save myself," Jimin replied. Their gazes locked, neither willing to look away. The van door opened at their hotel entrance, the sudden flood of noise and flashing cameras forcing them back into performance mode. They stepped out side by side, faces composed, movements synchronized from years of practice. To the public, they were flawless. Inside the elevator, alone at last, the facade crumbled. Jungkook pressed the emergency stop button. The sudden stillness was deafening. "What are you doing?" Jimin asked, his voice tight. "Finishing this conversation," Jungkook said. The confined space amplified everything, their breathing, the faint scent of Jungkook's cologne, the tension vibrating between them like a live wire. "You said you're losing me," Jungkook continued. "Do you really believe that?" Jimin swallowed. "I believe we're drifting into roles we never chose." "And what role do you think I want?" Jungkook demanded. "The safe one, the lie." Jimin hesitated. Jungkook stepped closer, his voice breaking. "I want you, in whatever way the world will allow, and if it won't allow it, I want it anyway, but I don't know how to keep you safe while I fight for that." The confession hit harder than any headline. Jimin's defenses wavered. "You can't control what hurts me," he whispered. "Then let me share it," Jungkook pleaded. "Stop shutting me out to prove you're strong." The elevator hummed softly, suspended between floors, a metal box holding two hearts on the verge of collapse. Jimin's voice trembled. "Do you know what they said about me this week? That I was desperate, that I was clinging to you for relevance, that I should disappear." Jungkook's expression darkened. "I saw." "And you still thought saying she would protect me?" Jimin asked, tears threatening again. "It told them I was nothing." "You are everything," Jungkook said fiercely. The words hung in the air, raw and undeniable. Jimin laughed through his tears. "You can't say that where it matters." "Then tell me where it matters," Jungkook challenged. Jimin looked at him, really looked, and saw not the global star, not the untouchable performer, but the boy who had once clutched his hand in dark hallways, afraid of thunderstorms and loneliness. "Here," Jimin whispered, "it matters here." Jungkook reached out, his hand trembling as it closed around Jimin's. The contact was electric, grounding, terrifying. For a moment, the world outside the elevator ceased to exist. Then the intercom crackled to life. Is everything okay in there? Reality crashed back. Jungkook released his hand, as if burned, and pressed the button to resume the elevator. The car lurched upward, carrying them toward floors filled with expectations and eyes that never stopped watching. When the doors opened, they stepped out with practiced distance between them. But something had shifted, something fragile and dangerous and impossible to ignore. And as they walked down the hallway toward their separate rooms, both of them knew the truth they had tried to outrun was no longer content to remain hidden. The fire alarm shrieked through the hotel at 2:13 a.m., and Jimin jolted upright in bed, heart hammering, the red emergency lights strobing across the walls like a warning he had been expecting but never prepared to face. For a moment he couldn't tell if the sound was real or another nightmare stitched together from headlines and camera flashes. Then came the pounding on doors, the muffled shouts in the hallway, and the unmistakable smell of smoke, sharp, acrid, creeping under the crack beneath his door. He grabbed his jacket and swung the door open. Guests flooded the corridor in various states of panic, staff directing them toward the stairwell. The red lights painted everyone in harsh shadows, turning familiar faces into strangers. Jimin scanned the chaos instinctively, searching for one person. Jungkook, he called, his voice nearly swallowed by the alarm. No answer. His chest tightened. Jungkook's room was 2 doors down. Jimin pushed against the current of bodies, ignoring the protests of a staff member trying to usher him the other way. He reached the door and pounded on it. Jungkook, open up. A beat too, then the door jerked open. Jungkook stood there, hair disheveled, eyes wide with sleep and confusion, the red lights flickering across his bare shoulders. What's happening? Fire alarm, Jimin said, relief crashing over him so hard his knees nearly buckled. We need to go. Jungkook nodded, grabbing a hoodie and pulling it over his head as they joined the flow toward the stairwell. The air grew thicker with smoke as they descended, the metallic tang stinging their throats. Someone coughed violently ahead of them. A child cried. A woman argued into her phone in a language Jimin couldn't process. Jungkook's hand found Jimin's wrist in the crush of bodies, steadying him as the stairwell narrowed. The contact was instinctive, unthinking. Neither of them let go. Outside, cold night air hit them like a shock. Emergency vehicles lined the street, lights flashing blue and red, sirens wailing into the darkness. Hotel guests huddled in clusters, wrapped in blankets, murmuring anxiously. Jimin bent forward, hands on his knees, gulping the cool air. Jungkook hovered close, his hand still resting lightly on Jimin's arm. Are you okay? Jungkook asked, voice hoarse. Jimin nodded, though his pulse still raced. You. I'm fine. Jungkook hesitated, then added quietly, you came for me. The simple statement carried more weight than any declaration. Of course I did, Jimin replied, straightening. You think I'd leave you? Jungkook held his gaze, something raw flickering in his eyes. You've been leaving me in every other way. The words landed harder than the cold. Jimin's mouth opened, then closed. Around them, reporters had already begun to gather, cameras rising like predatory birds drawn to chaos. Even a fire alarm couldn't grant them anonymity. Not here, Jimin murmured. Jungkook followed his glance and exhaled sharply. Right, of course, never here. They were ushered toward a roped-off area for safety, staff forming a loose barrier. The night air buzzed with speculation, guests whispering about electrical faults, kitchen fires, sabotage. The word sabotage made Jimin's stomach twist. His phone buzzed relentlessly in his pocket. When he finally checked it, his blood ran cold. Trending hotel fire, was it targeted? Trending, JUNGKOOK, and JIMINEVACUATD together. Trending, secret relationship confirmed. He showed the screen to Jungkook. Jungkook let out a hollow laugh. They work fast. It hasn't even been an hour, Jimin said. It doesn't take an hour to invent a story, Jungkook replied. A reporter shouted from beyond the barrier, Jungkook, Jimin, Were you together when the alarm sounded? The question sliced through the night. Jungkook's jaw tightened. We were evacuating like everyone else. Were you in the same room? Another voice pressed. Jimin felt heat rise in his chest despite the cold. That's inappropriate, he said firmly. Fans deserve honesty, someone shouted back. Fans deserve safety information about the fire, Jungkook snapped, his patience finally fracturing, not details about our private lives. The crowd buzzed, sensing blood in the water. A camera flash exploded inches from Jimin's face, and for a split second, he was back in the press conference, back in the suffocating weight of expectation. His chest tightened. Jungkook stepped in front of him, blocking the cameras. "Back off," he said, voice low and dangerous. The protective gesture did not go unnoticed. Whispers rippled through the crowd. "They're not even hiding it. Did you see that? This is bigger than we thought." Jimin's pulse roared in his ears. "Stop," he whispered, grabbing Jungkook's sleeve. "You're making it worse." "I'm trying to protect you," Jungkook said, not turning around. "And I'm trying to survive this," Jimin shot back. The words hung between them, heavy with exhaustion. A fire official approached, speaking with their manager in urgent tones. The fire had started in a storage area, electrical, accidental, no injuries, contained. Accidental. Jimin should have felt relief. Instead, a strange hollowness settled in his chest. Even disasters had become backdrops for speculation. They were escorted back inside after an hour. The smoke cleared, the alarms silenced. The lobby smelled faintly of charred plastic and wet carpet. Staff moved briskly, restoring order, erasing evidence of chaos. In the elevator, alone again, the silence was different from before, less fragile, more exhausted. Jungkook leaned against the mirrored wall, eyes closed. "I'm so tired of this," he murmured. "Of the rumors?" Jimin asked. "Of pretending we're not human," Jungkook replied. "Of having every instinct turned into a headline." Jimin studied their reflections, two figures standing apart, yet tethered by something invisible. "You stepped in front of me," he said softly, "outside." Jungkook opened his eyes. "I always will." The certainty in his voice made Jimin's throat tighten. "Even if it destroys you." Jungkook's gaze didn't waver. "What's the point of surviving if I lose you anyway?" The elevator dinged, doors sliding open onto their floor. "They didn't move." "Say it again," Jimin whispered. Jungkook's breath hitched. "You're the most precious person to me." No stage lights, no microphones, no audience. Just truth, fragile and terrifying. Jimin's eyes filled, but he didn't look away. "Then stop choosing the world over me." Jungkook stepped closer, close enough that Jimin could feel the warmth radiating from him. "I'm trying to find a way to choose both," he said, "but the world keeps demanding sacrifices." "Maybe the world doesn't deserve one," Jimin replied. The statement hung in the air like a spark. For the first time, Jungkook looked tempted. A shout from down the hallway shattered the moment, staff calling for a late-night security briefing. Reality intruded again, relentless. Jungkook exhaled slowly and stepped back. "We'll talk after," he said. Jimin nodded, though a quiet voice inside him wondered how many times after could be postponed before it became never. They walked down the hallway side by side, not touching, their shoulders nearly brushing with each step. Behind them, the faint smell of smoke lingered, a reminder that even contained fires left marks. And though the flames had been extinguished, something between them had ignited beyond their control, burning hotter with every attempt to smother it. The security briefing dissolved into shouting before it even began, and the moment the words, "damage control," left the manager's mouth, Jungkook slammed his hand against the conference table hard enough to make the water glasses jump. "I'm not a crisis," he said, his voice shaking with restrained fury. "Neither is he." The room fell silent. Staff exchanged uneasy glances. The air conditioner hummed overhead, an indifferent witness to the fracture widening in real time. Jimin sat at the far end of the table, fingers laced tightly in his lap, his posture immaculate despite the storm raging inside him. He had attended dozens of these meetings, strategies, statements, apologies polished into corporate language, but tonight felt different. Tonight, he was the subject, not the spectator. The manager inhaled slowly, as if bracing himself. No one is calling you a crisis. We are managing a situation that could impact the group, the tour, the brand. The brand, Jungkook repeated, a hollow laugh escaping him. That's what we are now. You know that's not what I meant, the manager said, though his eyes flickered with uncertainty. Jimin finally spoke, his voice calm but edged with steel. Then say what you mean. Every head turned toward him. The manager hesitated. Public perception is volatile. Last night's statement, the press conference, the evacuation, it's creating a narrative we cannot control. A narrative we cannot control, Jimin echoed softly, or a truth you cannot package. The accusation hung in the air like smoke. One of the PR coordinators cleared her throat. We've drafted a clarification. It emphasizes that Jungkook was referring to a professional collaborator and that the team remains focused on the tour. Jungkook stared at her, a lie. It's a clarification, she insisted. It's a lie, he repeated more quietly. Jimin felt his pulse quicken. He had expected this, denial wrapped in polite language, a return to the safety of ambiguity. It was the path they had always taken, the path that hurt less publicly and more privately. Maybe we should release it, Jimin said. Jungkook's head snapped toward him. What? The room held its breath. Jimin kept his gaze on the table. It would calm the speculation, protect everyone. Everyone except you, Jungkook said, disbelief and anger threading his voice. Jimin looked up then, his eyes bright but steady. I've survived worse. The words landed like a slap. Jungkook pushed his chair back abruptly, the legs screeching against the floor. You shouldn't have to survive us. We're not a war, Jimin replied. Then why does it feel like one? Jungkook shot back. Silence fell again, heavier this time. The manager rubbed his temples. We are losing focus. The statement goes out in 1 hour. I suggest you both rest. I'm not signing it, Jungkook said. You don't need to sign it, the PR coordinator replied gently. It will be issued on behalf of the management. That's worse, he muttered. Jimin stood, smoothing his jacket. If it helps the group, do it. Jungkook stared at him as if he were a stranger. When did you decide you were expendable? The question sliced deeper than any headline. Jimin's composure wavered for a fraction of a second. When I realized I wasn't the one being protected, he said quietly. He turned and walked out before anyone could respond. The hallway outside felt colder than before, the fluorescent lights too bright, too unforgiving. Jimin walked without direction, past framed posters and identical doors, until the noise of the meeting faded into a distant hum. He didn't hear Jungkook following him until a hand caught his arm. Stop running, Jungkook said, breathless. Jimin pulled free. I'm not running, I'm making this easier. For who? Jungkook demanded. For them, for the fans who think they own us, or for you so you don't have to admit you want more than this half-life we're living. The words struck with brutal accuracy. Jimin's voice trembled. Wanting more doesn't make it possible. It makes it honest, Jungkook replied. They stood facing each other in the empty corridor, the tension between them crackling like live electricity. You think honesty will set us free? Jimin asked, almost laughing. Honesty will put us on every front page. Honesty will turn our lives into a debate. Honesty will make them tear you apart for loving the wrong person. I don't care, Jungkook said. I do, Jimin's voice broke, echoing off the walls. I care because I've watched you carry the weight of everyone's expectations since you were a teenager. I care because one wrong move could destroy everything you've built. I care because loving you shouldn't mean ruining you. The confession hung between them, raw and irreversible. Jungkook's eyes softened, then hardened again with resolve. You don't ruin me, he said. You're the only reason I'm still standing. Jimin shook his head, tears slipping free. That's exactly why this is dangerous. Footsteps echoed faintly at the far end of the hall, staff moving, voices approaching. Time was running out again, as it always did. Jungkook stepped closer, lowering his voice. Come with me. Where's? Anywhere that isn't this, he said. Let's leave, tonight, just for a few hours, no cameras, no statements, just us. The suggestion was reckless, impossible, tempting. Jimin's heart pounded. You're serious. I've never been more serious, Jungkook replied. 1,000 consequences flashed through Jimin's mind. Contracts, headlines, betrayal, freedom. The word freedom felt foreign, almost dangerous. You're asking me to choose, Jimin said. I'm asking you to stop choosing everyone else first, Jungkook answered. The hallway noise grew louder. A door opened somewhere behind them. The world was closing in. Jimin closed his eyes. For years he had chosen survival, chosen silence, chosen the version of himself that fit neatly into expectations. And yet, standing here, with Jungkook's hand hovering inches from his, he felt the fragile possibility of something else, something terrifyingly real. When he opened his eyes, they were shining with unshed tears. 2 hours, he whispered, no more. Relief and disbelief crashed across Jungkook's face. 2 hours, he agreed. They moved quickly, slipping down a service stairwell to avoid the lobby cameras. The air smelled of concrete and detergent, the hum of fluorescent lights their only companion. It felt absurdly thrilling, like teenagers sneaking out past curfew. Outside, the city was still awake, neon signs flickering, distant traffic humming, the night air cool against their skin. For the first time in weeks, there were no cameras pointed at them, no staff hovering nearby. They walked without speaking, the silence charged but peaceful. Finally, Jungkook said, I meant it, on stage, even if I said it wrong. Jimin looked at him, I know. They stopped at a quiet riverside promenade, the water reflecting fractured city lights. The smell of the river mingled with street food from a vendor closing his stall nearby. Somewhere, a radio played a soft, melancholic tune. This is what normal people do, Jungkook said, almost wonderingly. Walk, breathe, exist. Jimin let out a soft laugh. We used to. Before the world decided who we were allowed to be, Jungkook added. They stood side by side, shoulders brushing, neither pulling away. Do you ever wish we'd met differently? Jungkook asked. Without the cameras, without the expectations. Jimin considered the question. No, he said finally, because then I might not have met you at all. Jungkook's breath caught. The moment felt suspended, fragile, luminous, dangerously real. Then a phone rang. Jungkook froze, glancing at the screen. His expression shifted instantly, shock, dread, disbelief. What is it? Jimin asked. Jungkook's voice was barely a whisper. It's from the company. He answered. The color drained from his face as he listened, eyes unfocused, hand trembling at his side. Jimin's stomach twisted with foreboding. When Jungkook finally spoke, his voice was hollow. We are coming back. He ended the call and looked at Jimin, devastation written plainly across his features. They're releasing the statement, he said, and they want us to stand together tomorrow and confirm it. The river continued to flow beside them, indifferent, relentless. Jimin felt something inside him fracture, not loudly, not dramatically, but with the quiet finality of a door closing. 2 hours of freedom, and already the world was calling them back to their cages. The television in the hotel suite was already on when they returned, the muted screen flashing a breaking news banner that neither of them had authorized, and Jimin felt the fragile calm of the riverside shatter before he even stepped fully into the room. Jungkook closed the door behind them with a soft click, that sounded far too final. On the screen, a headline scrolled relentlessly. Official statement, expected, JUNGKOOKDNIES AFFIRMS relationship with actress. Jimin stopped walking. For a moment, he thought he had misread it. Then the words burned into focus, each one a deliberate incision. Affirms, he repeated, the syllables dry in his throat. Jungkook stared at the screen, his face draining of color. I didn't agree to that, he said, but his voice lacked conviction. They didn't need you to, Jimin replied quietly. The room felt smaller, the air heavier. Outside, the city lights glittered with indifferent beauty, unaware that inside this suite, something irreversible was unfolding. Jungkook grabbed the remote and switched the volume on. A news anchor's polished voice filled the room. Sources indicate the statement will clarify that Jungkook's onstage comment referred to a long-rumored romantic connection, putting to rest speculation surrounding his relationship with fellow member Jimin. Jungkook turned the television off so abruptly the screen went black mid-sentence. Silence rushed in, loud and suffocating. Jimin laughed, a hollow sound that didn't belong to him. Putting to rest speculation, he echoed. That's one way to describe erasing someone. That's not what this is, Jungkook said, but he sounded as if he were trying to convince himself. Then tell me what it is, Jimin demanded, his composure cracking open. Because from where I'm standing, it looks like they've written the ending without asking us how the story began. Jungkook ran both hands through his hair, packing the length of the suite like a caged animal. They're panicking. They think this will stop the scrutiny. It won't, Jimin said. It will just redirect it. Jungkook stopped packing. What do you mean? Jimin met his gaze, eyes bright with unshed tears. It will tell them I was delusional, that I imagined everything, that I clung to you for attention. Jungkook's expression twisted. No one who knows you would believe that. The world doesn't know me, Jimin replied. They know headlines. The truth of it settled like ash. Jungkook stepped closer, his voice low. Then we don't let them publish it. Jimin's breath caught. You think we have that power? I don't care if we do, Jungkook said. I'm done letting them decide who you are to me. The words ignited something fragile and dangerous in Jimin's chest. Hope, sharp as broken glass. And what happens after that? Jimin asked. Contracts broken, sponsors gone, tour cancelled. You've spent your whole life building this. You'll watch it burn for the sake of what? A truth the world will twist into something ugly. Jungkook didn't hesitate. For you. The room fell into stunned silence. Jimin looked away, the weight of those two words too heavy to hold. You don't get to make me your reason to self-destruct. And you don't get to decide that loving you is destruction, Jungkook shot back. The tension surged, hot and volatile. You think this is romantic, Jimin demanded, voice rising. You think sacrificing everything will make this noble, it will make it tragic, it will make me the villain in your story. You could never be the villain, Jungkook said fiercely. Watch them try, Jimin replied. The air between them crackled with years of restraint finally combusting. Jungkook's voice broke. Why are you fighting me on this? Because I love you enough not to let you ruin yourself, Jimin whispered. The confession landed with devastating clarity. Jungkook froze, every trace of anger draining from his face. You what? Jimin's hands trembled at his sides. He hadn't planned to say it. He had buried those words beneath years of careful silence, convinced that naming them would destroy the fragile balance they had maintained. But the balance was already gone. I love you, Jimin said again, the words quieter but steadier. And that's exactly why I won't let you throw your life away to prove it. Jungkook's eyes filled, the vulnerability in them almost unbearable to witness. You think my life without you in it would be intact? He asked. Jimin swallowed hard. You would survive. I don't want to survive, Jungkook said. I want to live, and living without you is just another form of pretending. The truth of it cut deeper than any accusation. A knock sounded at the door, 3 sharp raps that shattered the moment. They both stared at it, the outside world demanding entry once again. "Don't answer," Jungkook said. The knocking came again, louder. "It's urgent," the manager's voice called through the door. Jimin closed his eyes. "We can't hide forever." Jungkook's jaw tightened. "Watch me." The knocking stopped. A pause, then the unmistakable sound of a keycard sliding into the lock. The door opened. The manager stepped in, flanked by 2 PR staff members, their expressions grave. He took in the scene, Jimin's tear-streaked face, Jungkook standing too close. The television still glowing faintly from residual heat. "You've seen the news," he said. "Yes," Jungkook replied coldly, "and we're not confirming it." The manager's gaze flicked to Jimin. "We need a unified response." "You have won," Jungkook said. "No." The manager exhaled slowly. "If you refuse, the company will proceed without your endorsement." Jimin felt the ground shift beneath him. "You'd release it anyway." "It's already scheduled," the manager admitted. "We hoped you would cooperate to avoid escalation." "Escalation," Jungkook repeated, his voice dangerously quiet. "You mean the truth." "I mean consequences," the manager said. Silence fell, heavy and suffocating. Jimin looked from the manager to Jungkook, his heart splintering under the weight of impossible choices. He could see the path ahead branching into futures he couldn't bear, one where they denied everything and preserved their careers at the cost of their truth, another where they spoke openly and watched the world tear them apart. Both roads demanded sacrifice. Jungkook reached for his hand, fingers threading through his with desperate certainty. "We choose," he said, "not them." Jimin's breath trembled. For years, choice had been an illusion. Tonight, it felt terrifyingly real. The manager's voice cut through the silence. "We need your answer, now." Jimin looked at Jungkook, at the boy who had become a man under relentless scrutiny, who still looked at him as if he were home. He thought of the stage lights, the headlines, the smoke in the stairwell, the 2 hours by the river that had felt more real than years of carefully managed existence. He thought of love, dangerous, inconvenient, undeniable. When he spoke, his voice was soft but unshakable. "No statement," he said. The room went still. The manager stared at him. "You understand what this means?" "Yes," Jimin replied. Jungkook's grip on his hand tightened, relief and fear colliding in his expression. Outside the sweet windows, the city continued to glow, unaware that inside, 2 lives had just veered irrevocably off script. The first thing Jimin noticed the next morning was the silence. No alarms, no staff knocking, no frantic messages vibrating his phone off the nightstand. The quiet felt unnatural, like the world had paused to take a breath before delivering a blow. Beside him, the other side of the bed was untouched. For a disorienting moment, he wondered if the previous night had been a dream stitched together from fear and longing. Then he saw Jungkook's hoodie draped over the chair, the faint scent of his cologne lingering in the air, and the memory came rushing back with brutal clarity. The confession, the refusal, the choice. Jimin reached for his phone. The screen lit up with a flood of notifications, so dense it felt like staring into a storm. Breaking company statement, DLAYD. Trending worldwide, LETJ-BAK, PROTCTJUNGKOOK. Leaked audio, fans claim management suppressing truth. His breath caught. He opened the first article he saw, anonymous sources, speculation, a blurry photo of him and Jungkook returning to the hotel together, shoulders nearly touching, a caption suggesting defiance. Defiance. The word sent a strange thrill through his chest, fear laced with something dangerously close to pride. A keycard beeped. Jimin looked up just as the door opened and Jungkook stepped inside, hair damp from a rushed shower, eyes shadowed with exhaustion. He froze when he saw Jimin awake. You're up, Jungkook said, voice tentative. Jimin held up his phone. The statement didn't go out. Jungkook nodded slowly. They postponed it. Emergency meeting with the board. Relief washed through Jimin, quickly followed by dread. Postponed meant pressure, negotiation, ultimatums. Jungkook leaned against the door, studying him. Are you okay? No, Jimin admitted, but I'm here. A faint smile tugged at Jungkook's lips. Here is good. Silence settled between them, softer than the night before, but no less charged. Did you sleep? Jimin asked. Jungkook shook his head. I walked. Alone. Jungkook hesitated. I needed to think. Jimin nodded, though a flicker of hurt stirred beneath his ribs. And I realized I've spent years waiting for permission to live my own life, Jungkook said quietly. I'm done waiting. The words should have been comforting. Instead, they terrified him. You say that now, Jimin murmured, but when the consequences arrive. They're already here, Jungkook cut in, and I'm still standing. A sharp knock interrupted them. Jungkook's jaw tightened. That'll be them. The door opened to reveal the manager, flanked by legal advisors this time, their expressions carved from stone. The atmosphere shifted instantly, the fragile intimacy of the room replaced by the cold precision of negotiation. We need to talk, the manager said. Jimin gestured toward the small seating area. We're listening. They sat across from each other like opposing sides in a courtroom. Contracts lay neatly stacked on the table, their presence ominous. The board is concerned, the manager began. Your refusal to cooperate has triggered sponsor anxiety and media escalation. We need a resolution today. Jungkook leaned back, arms crossed. Resolution or compliance? The manager didn't flinch. Those words are not mutually exclusive. Jimin felt the trap closing. What are you asking from us? A joint appearance, one of the legal advisors said. You will deny any romantic involvement and reaffirm your commitment to the group and its fans. The words felt like acid on Jimin's tongue. And if we refuse? Jungkook asked. The advisor's expression remained neutral. Contractual breaches carry financial penalties, significant ones. Silence fell. Jimin stared at the documents, the neat lines of text representing years of work, sacrifice, and dreams built on fragile foundations. He imagined the domino effect: cancelled endorsements, halted tour, staff losing jobs. The cost of honesty was not theirs alone. They're not bluffing, he said softly. I know, Jungkook replied. The manager leaned forward. This is not about denying who you are. It's about preserving what you've built. Jimin looked up, eyes sharp. You can't separate those things. A flicker of sympathy crossed the manager's face before it vanished. The world already does. The truth of it settled like a weight on Jimin's chest. Jungkook stood abruptly, packing. You're asking us to lie. I'm asking you to survive, the manager said. Jimin closed his eyes. Survival, the word had defined his life for as long as he could remember. Surviving expectations, surviving scrutiny, surviving the quiet ache of loving someone he was never meant to love openly. But survival had begun to feel indistinguishable from erasure. Jungkook stopped packing and looked at him. We can walk away. The room froze. The manager's voice hardened. Be careful. I'm serious, Jungkook continued, his gaze locked on Jimin. We can leave, not forever, but long enough to remind them we're not assets. Jimin's heart pounded. The idea was reckless, terrifying, exhilarating. You'd risk everything, he said. I already did the moment I said you were precious, Jungkook replied. The legal advisors exchanged uneasy glances. This is not a negotiation tactic, one of them said. This is your livelihood. This is my life, Jungkook countered. The distinction hung in the air, impossible to ignore. Jimin stood slowly. If we agree to this appearance, he said carefully, we want one condition. All eyes turned to him. No scripted answers, he continued. No fabricated names, we speak in our own words. The manager hesitated. That introduces risk. So does silencing us, Jimin replied. A long pause followed, tension coiling tighter with each passing second. Finally, the manager nodded once. You'll have 5 minutes, no more. It wasn't victory, but it wasn't surrender. After they left, the room felt eerily quiet again. Jungkook exhaled sharply. 5 minutes to tell the truth in a world that doesn't want it. Jimin's lips curved faintly. 5 minutes is more than we've ever had. Jungkook stepped closer. Are you afraid? Yes, Jimin admitted, but I'm more afraid of disappearing. Jungkook reached for his hand, their fingers intertwining with a certainty that no longer felt accidental. You won't, he said, not while I'm here. The warmth of his grip steadied Jimin's racing heart. Outside, the city roared to life, unaware that in a quiet hotel suite, two people were preparing to step into a storm that could either destroy them or finally set them free. The stage lights were already blazing when they stepped into the studio, and the heat from them felt less like illumination and more like interrogation. Jimin could hear the murmur of the live audience beyond the cameras. A restless current of anticipation. The broadcast had been announced only an hour earlier, yet the world was already watching. He could feel it, the weight of millions of eyes pressing through the lens, hungry for clarity, for scandal, for something they could claim as truth. Beside him, Jungkook's shoulder brushed his for half a second before they took their seats. The contact was brief, but it steadied Jimin more than any rehearsed reassurance could have. Across from them sat the host, her smile polished, her gaze sharp with the thrill of proximity to controversy. Thank you for joining us on such short notice, she began, her tone smooth but electric. The world has been buzzing with questions, and tonight you've agreed to answer them in your own words. In your own words. Jimin felt Jungkook's fingers twitch against his knee, beneath the table. The host leaned forward slightly. Let's begin with the moment that started it all. Jungkook, when you said on stage, she is the most precious person to me, who were you referring to? The question landed like a hammer. Silence stretched, fragile and immense. Jimin could hear the faint hum of the studio lights, the rustle of someone shifting in their seat in the audience. He could feel his own heartbeat in his throat. Jungkook inhaled slowly. I was referring to someone I wanted to protect, he said. The host's eyes gleamed, a romantic partner. Jungkook's gaze flicked to Jimin for the briefest moment. Someone I love, he replied. A collective intake of breath rippled through the studio. The host's composure faltered for a fraction of a second before she turned to Jimin. And you, Jimin, how did that statement affect you? The world narrowed to the space between the microphone and his lips. He thought of the headlines, the smoke in the stairwell, the 2 hours by the river, the confession that had torn him open and stitched him back together in the same breath. It hurt, he said simply. The honesty rang louder than any denial. The host tilted her head, because you felt excluded. Jimin's gaze hardened, because it wasn't the whole truth. The audience erupted into murmurs, the tension spiking like a live wire. Jungkook's hand moved under the table, finding Jimin's, their fingers intertwined, hidden from the cameras but anchoring them both. The host leaned in, voice softer but more dangerous. Then what is the truth? Jimin's pulse roared in his ears. 5 minutes, he reminded himself, 5 minutes to exist without apology. The truth, he said, is that people hear what fits their expectations. They want simple stories, boy meets girl, idol dates actress, rumors resolved. They don't want complexity. They don't want to confront the possibility that love doesn't always fit the narratives they're comfortable with. The room went utterly still. The host's smile faltered. Are you suggesting? I'm saying, Jimin continued, his voice steady despite the tremor in his chest, that reducing people to headlines erases who they really are. Jungkook squeezed his hand, silent support radiating through the contact. The host turned back to Jungkook, her tone sharpening. So you are not confirming a relationship with an actress. Jungkook met her gaze. I am confirming that my words were never meant to satisfy speculation. They were meant to express that someone in my life is precious to me. Is that someone Jimin? She asked, the question slicing through the air with surgical precision. The audience gasped. Somewhere a camera zoomed in. Jimin's breath caught. The world seemed to tilt. Jungkook did not look away. Yes, he said. The word detonated. Sound rushed back all at once, shouts from the audience, the frantic whispering of producers, the host's stunned inhale. Jimin felt his chest constrict, not with fear, but with the overwhelming weight of truth finally spoken aloud. The host struggled to regain control. Are you saying you are in a romantic relationship? Jungkook's grip tightened. I'm saying he is the most precious person to me. Labels are for people who need to categorize what they don't understand. The statement was both answer and defiance. Jimin's eyes filled, the studio lights fracturing into halos through his tears. He had imagined this moment 1,000 times, always ending in catastrophe. Yet here he was, still breathing, still sitting beside the person who had chosen him in front of the world. The host turned to Jimin, voice trembling slightly. Do you feel the same? Every consequence loomed before him, contracts, backlash, the possibility of losing everything he had built. But beneath it all was a quiet, unshakable certainty. Yes, he said. The word was barely louder than a whisper, but it echoed through the studio like a thunderclap. Chaos erupted. Producers shouted off camera. Audience members cried, some cheering, some arguing. The host removed her earpiece, clearly receiving frantic instructions. The broadcast teetered on the edge of being cut. Through it all, Jimin and Jungkook sat side by side, hands clasped beneath the table, their shared warmth the only stable thing in a world tilting off its axis. This broadcast may be terminated, the host said, her professional composure cracking. Do you understand the magnitude of what you're saying? Jungkook nodded. We do. Jimin swallowed, his voice steadier than he felt. We're not asking for approval, we're asking to exist. The statement hung in the air, fragile and defiant. The studio lights seemed harsher now, the heat oppressive, but Jimin no longer felt like he was suffocating. For the first time in years, he felt terrifyingly, undeniably alive. The screen behind them flickered as producers scrambled to cut the feed. The host stared at them, speechless, caught between professionalism and the gravity of history unfolding in real time. Jungkook leaned closer, his voice low enough that only Jimin could hear. Whatever happens next, he murmured, we face it together. Jimin turned his head, their foreheads nearly touching, the world dissolving into light and noise around them. Together, he whispered. And as the broadcast signal finally cut to black, the silence that followed was not the silence of suppression, but the breathless pause before an entire world decided how it would respond to the truth. The dressing room door slammed so hard the mirror lights flickered, and Jimin's reflection fractured into a dozen trembling versions of himself, each one whispering the same accusation he had tried to outrun. You are the reason everything is breaking. He braced his hands against the counter, breath shallow, the sharp scent of hairspray and overheated wiring filling his lungs. Outside, the muffled roar of the crowd bled through the concrete walls like a distant storm. Every cheer felt like a lie. Every chant sounded like a verdict. The words from the broadcast still rang in his ears. Public sentiment is turning, the commentator had said, voice smooth and clinical. Fans question whether Jimin's presence is damaging the group's image. Damaging, the word had carved into him deeper than any scream. The door creaked open behind him. You ran off before the encore. Jimin didn't turn. He would have recognized Jungkook's voice even if he'd been deaf. Low, strained, wrapped in a restraint that made it more dangerous than anger. "I thought you were done defending me on stage," Jimin replied, his tone brittle. "Wasn't that enough?" Silence pooled between them. Then footsteps, slow, careful. Jungkook stopped just behind him, close enough that Jimin could feel the warmth of his presence, but not touching. Not yet. "They twisted what I said," Jungkook murmured. "They always do." Jimin let out a hollow laugh. "You said I was the most precious person to you. You think they were going to leave that alone?" "I meant it." The words landed like a dropped glass, fragile, irreversible. Jimin finally turned. Jungkook's eyes were rimmed red, not from stage lights, but from something rawer, something sleepless. There was a tremor in his jaw that betrayed the effort it took to stay composed. "You shouldn't have said it," Jimin whispered. "You don't understand what they'll do with it, what they're already doing." "I understand perfectly," Jungkook shot back, a flash of heat breaking through. "They're trying to make you disappear, and you're helping them." The accusation hit harder than any online comment. Jimin's fingers curled into fists. "You think I want this? You think I enjoy watching everything we built get torn apart because of me?" "I think you're letting them decide who you are," Jungkook said, "and I won't watch you erase yourself to make them comfortable." The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. Somewhere down the hall, a stagehand shouted cues. The world was moving forward, indifferent to the fracture happening in this small room. Jimin swallowed, his voice cracking despite his effort. "You don't know what it's like to wake up and see your name trending next to words like liar, attention seeker, burden. You don't know what it's like to have strangers dissect your every smile like it's evidence." Jungkook's expression softened, but the intensity remained. "You think I don't read those comments? You think I don't see what they say about me for standing beside you? Then why keep doing it?" Jimin demanded. "Why keep choosing me when it costs you everything?" Jungkook stepped closer. "Because not choosing you would cost me more." The room seemed to tilt. Jimin's breath hitched, his carefully constructed defenses cracking under the weight of that confession. He looked away, unable to bear the sincerity in Jungkook's gaze. "You're going to regret this," Jimin said, quieter now. "When the sponsors pull out, when the company starts asking questions, when the fans turn on you too." "They already have," Jungkook replied, "and I'm still here." A tremor ran through Jimin's shoulders. He hated how much he wanted to believe him, hated how hope felt more dangerous than despair. A knock shattered the moment. 5 minutes, a manager's voice called through the door. "Emergency meeting, all members." Jimin's stomach dropped. He didn't need to ask what it was about. Jungkook's jaw tightened. "They're going to make you apologize." Jimin closed his eyes. "Of course they are." "And you're going to do it?" Jungkook asked. The question hung like a blade. When Jimin opened his eyes again, something in them had changed. Not broken, not yet, but braced. "If that's what it takes to stop this," he said, "then yes." Jungkook stared at him as if he'd been struck. "You're apologizing for existing?" he asked, voice dangerously quiet. "I'm apologizing for causing damage," Jimin said. "There's a difference." "There isn't," Jungkook snapped. "Not to them, not to the headlines they're already drafting." Jimin grabbed his jacket from the chair, hands shaking. "I don't have the luxury of pride right now." "And I don't have the luxury of watching you disappear," Jungkook shot back. Their eyes locked, years of trust, laughter, shared dreams, and unspoken fears colliding in a single, unbearable moment. Then Jimin looked away first. "We should go," he said. The walk to the conference room felt like a procession to judgment. Staff members avoided eye contact. Phones buzzed incessantly. Screens flashed with headlines that Jimin refused to read, though he caught glimpses of his name, Jungkook's name, and words like scandal, controversy, divide. Inside the room, the atmosphere was suffocating. Executives sat rigidly at the table, expressions carved from stone. The other members looked torn between worry and helplessness. The CEO didn't waste time. "This situation is escalating," he said. We need immediate damage control. Jimin's throat tightened. A document slid across the table toward him, a prepared statement, an apology, carefully worded, bloodless. He didn't need to read it to know what it said. Jungkook's chair scraped loudly against the floor. He's not signing that. Every head turned. This is not your decision, the CEO replied coolly. It is when you're asking him to take the fall for something he didn't do, Jungkook said. Public perception. Public perception is not truth, Jungkook cut in, and you're about to sacrifice him to protect a narrative. The room erupted into overlapping voices, warnings, reprimands, attempts to de-escalate, but Jungkook didn't sit down. He stood there, defiant, breathing hard, as if daring the entire system to challenge him. Jimin felt a surge of panic. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. He was supposed to absorb the damage, contain the fallout, keep everyone else safe. Jungkook, he said quietly, sit down. No. The single word was immovable. Please, Jimin whispered, don't make this worse. Jungkook turned to him, eyes blazing. Worse than you apologizing for being loved, for being human, for being someone I refuse to lose. The room fell silent. The words hung there, undeniable, irreversible. Jimin's vision blurred. He didn't know if it was from tears or the sudden, crushing weight of being seen, fully, painfully, undeniably seen. One of the executives cleared his throat. If this continues, there will be consequences. Jungkook didn't look away from Jimin. There already are. In that moment, Jimin understood that the crisis was no longer about public opinion, contracts, or headlines. It was about a choice neither of them could avoid any longer. To protect the image they had built, or to protect the truth they had lived. And as the silence stretched, heavy with the future pressing down on them, Jimin realized with a quiet, terrifying clarity that whichever path they chose, nothing would ever be the same again. The silence in the conference room did not break all at once. It fractured slowly, like ice under too much weight. Jimin stared at the unsigned statement on the table. The paper seemed harmless, thin, crisp, official, but it carried the power to erase him in a way no headline ever could. If he signed it, the narrative would settle, the public would move on, the group would be safe. He would not. His fingers hovered above the page. They trembled, not from fear of the backlash, but from the deeper terror of vanishing in plain sight. Across from him, Jungkook stood unmoving, shoulders squared, eyes locked on Jimin with a fierce, unyielding resolve that both steadied and unraveled him. Jimin, the CEO said, voice tight with impatience, we don't have time. Time, the one thing Jimin felt had been stolen from him, years of shaping himself into someone palatable, careful, safe. Years of smiling through exhaustion, swallowing doubts, pretending the noise outside didn't seep into his bones. He thought of the comments that had cut him open, the accusations, the strangers who believed they knew the measure of his worth. Then he thought of the stage lights, the warmth of the crowd when they sang together, the quiet moments backstage when laughter came easily and no one had to perform. He thought of Jungkook's voice earlier that night, ringing through the arena, she is the most precious person to me. Precious, not perfect, not convenient, precious. Jimin exhaled, long and unsteady. He slid the paper back across the table. I won't sign it. The room erupted. Voices clashed, shock, anger, warnings about contracts and reputations, but Jimin heard none of it clearly. The pressure that had been crushing his chest for weeks loosened just enough for him to breathe. The CEO's expression hardened. Do you understand the consequences of this decision? Yes, Jimin said, his voice quiet but steady. For the first time I do. A chair scraped as Jungkook finally sat down, not in defeat, but in relief so visible it made Jimin's throat tighten. Their eyes met for a brief second, and in that look was a conversation too deep for words, gratitude, fear, and a fragile, stubborn hope. The meeting dissolved into damage control strategies that no longer centered on an apology. There would be statements, clarifications, interviews carefully managed. The storm would not disappear, but it would be faced, not surrendered to. When it was over, the hallway outside felt strangely calm. The building had quieted, the frenzy of the concert replaced by the low hum of cleanup crews and distant traffic. Night pressed against the windows, vast and indifferent. Jimin walked without direction until he reached the empty stage. The arena lights were off, leaving only a single work lamp casting a pale circle on the floor. The seats stretched into darkness, thousands of silent witnesses. He stepped into the light. The stage felt different without the roar of fans, larger, lonelier, honest. Every scuff mark on the floor told a story of rehearsals, mistakes, triumphs. This was where he had given everything, piece by piece, until he wasn't sure what remained. Footsteps approached from behind, soft but unmistakable. "You always come here when it's over," Jungkook said. Jimin didn't turn. It's the only time the stage tells the truth. Jungkook joined him in the circle of light. For a moment, neither spoke. The air smelled faintly of dust and lingering smoke from the show's effects. "Are you scared?" Jungkook asked. Jimin considered the question. "Yes," he admitted, "but not in the way I was before." "Before?" "I was scared of losing them," Jimin said, gesturing vaguely toward the darkened seats, the world beyond. "Now I'm scared of losing myself." Jungkook nodded slowly, as if committing the words to memory. "Then we protect that," he said, "no matter what." Jimin let out a soft, incredulous laugh. "You make it sound simple." "It isn't," Jungkook replied, "but it's worth it." The quiet between them was no longer suffocating. It was fragile, but real, like the first stillness after a storm, when the world hasn't decided yet whether it will heal or break further. "I'm sorry," Jimin said suddenly. Jungkook frowned. "For what?" "For thinking I had to disappear to keep everyone safe," Jimin said. "For not trusting that we could survive this." Jungkook's expression softened, the fierce edge giving way to something warmer. "We are still here," he said. "That's a start." Jimin looked out into the darkness again, imagining the faces that had once filled the seats, some supportive, some critical, all part of the complicated tapestry of the life he had chosen. "They might never accept it," he said. "Maybe not," Jungkook replied, "but they don't get to decide your worth." The words settled into Jimin's chest, heavy but grounding. For the first time in weeks, the noise in his mind quieted. Not gone, not defeated, but no longer in control. He stepped back from the light. "Come on," he said, "we should go." Jungkook tilted his head. "Where?" Jimin allowed himself a small, genuine smile. "Somewhere we don't have to be perfect." They walked off the stage together, their footsteps echoing briefly before being swallowed by the vast, empty arena. Behind them, the single work lamp flickered, then went dark, leaving the stage in shadow, but not abandoned. Outside, the night air was cool against Jimin's skin, carrying the distant sounds of the city, life continuing, indifferent to scandal or headlines. For the first time, he didn't feel crushed by that indifference. He felt freed by it. The world would talk, it always did. But he would remain. Not as a rumor, not as a headline, not as a sacrifice. As himself.